Hi everyone. This week we're going to be talking about human biology, and this short video in particular is going to be talking about human osteology, which is basically the study of bones and the skeleton. So I'm going to take you through, in particular, a couple of slides. The first one is just to test your knowledge. So I wanted to know if you had some ideas without looking through the material about differences in the skulls of human males and females. If you think about the males and females that you know, people have different qualities, different characteristics of their skulls, their faces, and of course these are on a spectrum, just like gender is on a spectrum, and the manifestation of characteristics are on a spectrum. But there are certain things that we can look for in order to guide our our understanding of what characteristics are more on the female end or the male end. So think about some of those things. I'm not going to tell you at this point, but as you go through the slides, you can check and see if your ideas were correct. Also, the skeletons of human males and females. Like in general, what do you think is different? What do you know to be different? What are different functions, biological functions of males and females, and how do you think the skeleton supports that? And then also the skulls of non-human primates and humans. Maybe you haven't thought about that before, but there are some major differences between the skulls of non-human primates and humans. Of course, we're also primates, but in particular, there's certain things about the shape and size of our skulls that are different from non-human primates. So think about those as well. As I mentioned before, the term osteology, it means the study of bones. So when we look at osteology, we're looking at skeletons, right? Comparisons of primate skeletons will help us understand the different adaptations we have, right? So in looking at the forms of the bones, we can understand more about the functions of those bones. In particular, movement, right? So certain types of bone structure and placement, how long limbs are in relationship to one another, for instance, where the spine fits into the base of the skull. All of these things have to do with locomotion or movement, right? How animals get from one place to another, right? And so often if you look at the mammalian skeleton, which is what we're all based on, and the primate skeleton in particular, you can tell something about how an animal moves by just looking at the bones themselves. All right, I'm going to skip through a few of these, and of course I'd like you to look at them on your own, but I want to, let's see. I would like to look in particular at how you can tell sex differences in the skull and also the pelvis. So of these two, which do you think is the most diagnostic bone in the human body to tell if a skeleton is male or female? If you said pelvis, you were right. So the pelvis is the most diagnostic bone, and that's because it differs quite a bit in males and females. And of course, again, we're talking about males and females here, but anthropology is fully aware that people lie on a sexual spectrum. There are intersex individuals, and there are individuals that have all kinds of different chromosomal or genetic differences that manifest themselves in terms of being on a spectrum in terms of even biological sex. So I will say male and female to sort of make these comparisons easier, but I want you to keep in mind that, of course, there's going to be variation along this spectrum. So we're going to start with the pelvis. This is not the clearest picture, but I do want to give you some vocabulary for the 3 things to look for if, you're in your backyard and digging one day, you're going to put a tree in and you come up with a pelvis. Like, it could happen, right? So to figure out whether it's a male or female pelvis, here's what you're going to look for. So you're going to look for whether the pelvis is vertical or splayed, right? So vertical would be more up and down like this, right? The 2 sides of the pelvis, up and down. And that is a male feature. Females have a pelvis that's more splayed like this, like a bird with wings, right? And of course you know why that is, right? Yes, that's right, because of childbirth, right? So females need wider pelvic bones in order for the birth canal to be large enough for a large baby head to fit down there. The second thing that we're going to look for is the greater sciatic notch. The greater sciatic notch is, I'm going to go back just a second, right? It is this section right here. Let's see if I can use my pen. Right there. I don't know if that showed up or not. And that greater sciatic notch is, it's basically just an opening in the back area of the pelvis, right near the sacrum, which is this section right here. The subpubic angle is the 3rd thing you look for. And the subpubic angle is an angle right underneath the pubic bone, which is around the front of the pelvis, right? So it would be this angle down here. I'll show you the picture again in just a second. The pubic symphysis is the area where the pubic bones come together, and they don't lock together. The bones don't lock here. There's actually an area of cartilage, right? So this area is a little bit slightly more flexible. And interestingly enough, you can look at this cartilage over time. So in order to tell how old the skeleton was, so people who are trained in this can look at the face of the pubic symphysis, and depending on how rough it is, they can tell approximately within about 5 years of how old that skeleton was, that person was when they passed, up until about 55 years old, and then you're just old. All right, so let me go back to the previous picture. And this is where the subpubic angle is, right under here. This is the pubic symphysis, which is that area of cartilage. So in males, generally these openings, the greater sciatic notch and the subpubic angle, are going to be smaller. And again, because of childbirth, in females, they're going to be larger. All right, and then what do we look for in terms of the skulls? So the skulls have 6 things to look for, and I'll go through these more quickly and then take you back to the picture. So for the skulls, if you look at the forehead of a skull, foreheads can be sloping or bulging, right? So these are funny descriptive words, but sloping means that males' foreheads tend to have a small slope. Bulging means they're more vertical. It doesn't mean that like our brains are bulging out of our bodies, but just that they're more vertical. And when I say our, I mean females. Brow ridges in males are going to be more developed. Brow ridges are the bones right above your eyes, right where your eyebrows are. And these are going to be more developed in males and less developed, more flat in females. Thirdly, the chin. Right? When you think about males' chins, generally they're more squared off, whereas females' chins are more angled. Okay? Another thing to look at on a skull would be muscle lines. The temporal muscles come up, they connect from your jaw, underneath your cheekbones, and then they attach to the sides of your skull right here. So in general, for the skull, men's skulls have more evidence of being sort of larger and muscles being stronger, whereas the pelvis, everything's larger in females. For the skull, most things are larger in males. So these temporal muscles that connect to the skull. In males, you can actually see where those lines, where the connection was, right? There are lines, sort of indentations on the skull where the muscles connected. And that's because in general, men's muscles are a little bit larger, right? We refer to that as sexual dimorphism. So they're a little bit larger overall, not as different or dimorphic than, say, gorillas or chimpanzees. And that's for a number of behavioral reasons. But males and females, in terms of humans, we tend to be a little bit more the same, right? Nonetheless, you can see those temporal muscles on the sides of the skull for males generally, whereas for females, they're fainter. So the fifth thing you're looking for is the mastoid process. Now, to find your mastoid process, you're going to feel right underneath your earlobes. And there's sort of a little indentation there, right? Then go farther back towards the back of your head and you'll feel a bone. That little bone, it looks like sort of Florida. And that little bone there, if you hold on to it and you turn your head side to side, you can feel where your neck muscles connect. That's called the mastoid process. A process, in terms of bone, it just means like something that sticks out, right? So again, in males, these are going to be larger, and in females, these are going to be smaller because of all those neck muscles that are connecting to it. And then lastly, the occipital protuberance. So your occipital bone is on the back of your skull, and generally males, especially males who are larger, will have just a little bit of a protuberance, right? So a little piece of bone that sticks out on the very bottom of the skull, on the occipital bone, and females will have less. So please do go through the rest of this PowerPoint on your own, and I hope this will help you if you're ever digging in your backyard and you come up with a skeleton. See you next time.